they ran a check on him and they said, sorry, we don't allow you in. And he could have applied for pardon and had that wiped out and probably had that matter solved, but it was a problem. It was a problem he didn't even realize.
Okay, we got a legal question here for just a moment. Go ahead.
Okay, if drugs are illegal, then why are weights and things for cocaine and stuff like that sold in stores? Like in downtown Winnipeg, there are these rock shops or whatever. They have weights for marijuana sold. Like, kids see these weights and they think it's legal. Then why is the drug illegal? That doesn't make sense. Like, kids are thinking, you know, if it's legal, or is it illegal? Because
if you can buy the stuff, how come you can't buy the drugs? It's like selling radial tires and not allowing people to drive cars.
It's a problem. The drugs are illegal. Buying certain types of instruments and things perhaps aren't illegal. It's perhaps similar to the fact that in Manitoba it's illegal to have a radar detector which is in your vehicle. You can buy them anywhere, but you can't have them in your vehicle, and that even means having them in a box in your vehicle. It's not the case in Saskatchewan. You can place them in your vehicle and drive them there, but
chalk it up to not making sense. We've got a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been doing heroin 3 times already, and I'm scared because if I get caught, my parents, I don't know what they'll do to me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you get out of doing heroin? What sort of feelings do you get?
I get high from doing it.
Yeah. When did you start?
Pardon?
How old were you when you started?
Well, 15, and I still am. I just tried it 3 times.
Mm-hmm. Did you start on anything else before heroin? Did you do any marijuana?
I did some hash before when I was 13.
What sort of age do we usually get kids starting drugs at? I know, heck, you started when you were, well, 21. Nothing as serious, but what's the median age? When do kids get exposed to this?
I don't know if the cameras can pick this up. This is from the States. IBM puts it out. IBM. It's interesting. It's a comic book. It's the first of its kind. It's called the Teen Titans, and it's designed for kids under 12 years of age, and it's all about superheroes who fight drug abuse. That's what it's all about. Now, the message that I want to pass out more than anything else is this is being designed to send out to kids who are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And here we are talking to a bunch of you people who are, you know a lot about drugs by now. You know more about drugs than a lot of the experts seem to know about the drugs. Kids this age are getting started onto the drugs at the ages of 9, 10, 11. We have kids who are facing problems with alcoholism and other types of drug abuse at the ages of 6, 7, and 8. And it just shows you how in the States, where it's got to, that they've had to develop a comic book, they feel, to try and get the idea across. And maybe we're lucky in Canada that it's not that bad yet, but it's coming. Maybe we've got to find some way to get to the younger kids before we worry just as much about you people.
Caller, are you still there?
I'd like to respond to the caller to really encourage you to do something about not doing heroin anymore. Heroin is a highly, 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 highly addictive substance. Plus, with all the difficulties of needle use and dirty needle use, it's just something to stay away from. Stop using it. Don't use it anymore. And if you need some support, there are lots of people that are willing to support you. Call a crisis line, talk to a friend, talk to a nurse, get the support you need, but please stop.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. For anyone out there that is using IV drugs, whatever you do, don't share needles. One of the surest way to get AIDS today is to share needles. And people don't, a lot of young people think that you have to buy drugs. The most dangerous drugs will be given to you free for a couple of months, especially if they're IV drug use. And often you'll be asked to prostitute yourself to pay for that habit. Don't expect that you're going to have to pay for these drugs. They often come looking for you, and don't take anything for free. And be really careful about that, and seek out help at a community health center or someone you trust if you have a problem.
Yeah, you've been talking about alcohol a few times tonight. Now, isn't alcohol also a drug? Like, I know it's not quite as serious. But like, there's kids at school, like, this is really what ticks me off. They say, no, we're against drugs and all this. They'll go out that night and have a 12 of beer. That's the thing that gets to me.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think from my point of view, I hope that I'm saying, and we have a bit of an argument going on, but I'm talking from a school setting, the #1 drug of choice amongst high school kids is alcohol. And it's a drug, and don't take any BS that tells you anything else.
I'm not trying to highlight drugs in any way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just saying that.
As a matter
How these people can go, like, it's almost hypocrite to go out and do this, and then...
As a matter of fact, I believe that alcohol, the AMA and even the Canadian equivalent of the AMA also list, I think, things like alcohol, prescription drugs. I think those two top the list every year as the biggest problem drugs, ahead of the marijuanas and the others that seem to get the press.
I would agree with Brad. I would say that alcohol is the biggest single drug problem we have, and I would like to see the breweries that spend so much money on advertising, promoting that, taking a good percentage of that money and putting into youth treatment programs. We don't have enough treatment programs out there. We have waiting lines for drug treatment and alcohol treatment programs for young people, and with the money that's spent on beer advertising today, that's sickening to me.
Just as a point about the breweries, so that I should give as a thing, they are one of their mandates is to work towards non-drug abuse situations. And a couple of the breweries that I work with, and I do work with some of the breweries, are very supportive with their money. And it's in directing programs such as things that I'm doing, going around and doing it.
But they love to sell beer to anybody.
You bet they do.
Anybody.
But they're also willing, and I think if we start approaching them, and there's other companies besides breweries that can start putting the money in. I hope you're right.
Brad, I'm going to disagree with you. I was president of a student association, and I had beer companies paying for any student event on a university campus and not putting one penny in the university of 37,000 students that I went to into any alcohol prevention programs. The breweries have to take it in the chin right now.
I'm not sure if they're being asked to do it.
Well, I think we have to start asking.
All right, we got a question.
Okay, I had a question, but I think it might have been answered. There was what you were saying about drugs and alcohol. Yeah, drugs and alcohol. I think there's a bit of a moral conflict. You know, parents, if you tell your parents, well, I went out last night and had a couple beer, they wouldn't say too much. Well, maybe some would, but if you tell them that you went out and you got stoned the night before, what would they do? And why is that? Like, is that because it leads to so many different things, or they think it leads to so many different things? Or
can I just say, just a comment in terms of I love that argument that people use in terms of the marijuana led them to this, it led them to this. I would bet anything in the world that the first thing they ever tried was alcohol. So why isn't it that the alcohol led them to the marijuana, which led them to the whatever you call it? I mean, I don't know, I just hear that one so much. I know I'm not really answering your question, but I think part of the problem there that you're talking about with the parents is just they're not familiar. They're not familiar with what you're talking about. When you say that they went out and got stoned, the traditional tactics originally used that most people remember are the scare tactics. And from that, you know, and those are the things that most parents, the direction they're coming from. So you mentioned you got stoned, they're afraid of it.
This is Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. We'll be right back.
Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll is a presentation of the Manitoba Television Network in cooperation with the Winnipeg Sun, 92 City FM, and KX 96 FM. This program is brought to you by Shoppers Drug Mart. Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll is presented as a public service by the Manitoba Television Network. Its intent is to help teenagers in dealing with concerns of a personal nature, including sexuality, alcohol, drug use, and stress. Explicit language may be used. Therefore, if you are likely to be offended by a frank and open discussion, we suggest you select another channel.
Well, I've noticed a big change in the kids just from 10 years ago when my kids were teenagers, while they're in their early 20s. And I don't like what I see, so I think things are sort of going downhill.
All right, we're back with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I missed my cue again. You say what?
We've been talking a lot about what's right and what's wrong and how to reach the younger than I generation on what is right and what is wrong. And what I want to know is, you're giving us a lot of help on what to do, but why aren't kids talking to kids? Because we're on the same level as each other, and from what I can see, if I'm talking to someone my own age, they're going to listen to me.
Kids are doing it. I think as an example, safe grads in high schools right now are run by kids. And the reason they're successful in the province are because the kids are running them, and they're teaching the kids how to set up a program to combat drinking and driving and other type of chemical abuse on their grad night. So I agree with you, and it's being done.
I was wondering if caffeine pills, like wake-up pills or that, are addictive.
All right, we've got a call waiting. Caller?
Well, anything can be addictive. Sleep can be addictive. Eating or dieting can be addictive. Depending on what your motivation is. Certainly those kind of uppers do become quickly addictive because they give that little edge about what you need to have happen. Chemically, they are addictive. They aren't addictive as some pills and medications are. But I would think even more important is, what is the style about which you're using drugs like that? Are you using a no-dose once in 10 years to be able to, or a cup of coffee? Coffee can also be addictive. How often do you do it? What is your motivation to do it? How quickly can you not do it when you choose? So I'd like to get back to Glenn's comment, is what is your choice? If you have a choice about using it or not using it, you're not addicted. If you lose that choice, that's when you're addicted.
I think we've got the call now. Caller, can you hear me? Caller?
Yes, I can hear you. Regarding earlier in the program, they were talking about sex education in the school. I'm all in favor of it. People that say that it shouldn't be in school are wrong, because they learn about chemistry in school. Does that mean they throw acid on their bodies? No, they learn how to handle it and how to face it. Let the children, let the teenager experience and learn how to deal with it and face it.
Sir, can I ask
that is my comment to people.
Can I ask how old you are?
Education is a blessing. Ignorance is a curse.
How old are you, sir?
I'm a parent. I'm 35 years old.
Did you have sex education when you were a kid?
No, unfortunately I didn't. It caused a lot of problems. But
Well,
I've learned to deal with them.
Maybe we haven't come as far as we think.
I knew a person in university, and one day he got a phone call from somebody, and he said that you were going to buy some marijuana, and if you're not, you're going to be in big trouble. What can a person do in this situation, and what could happen to a person if he gets caught in possession of these drugs or whatever?
Can you explain the scenario a little better in terms of, I mean, someone told him he had to buy it?
He got a phone call from somebody, I guess a drug pusher from the university on the campus, and he was told, you're gonna buy some drugs. If you don't, you're gonna get in some very deep trouble with us.
Well, let's throw that question to our lawyer. What can happen if, what happens if you're caught in possession of marijuana? What are a person's rights? What do you do?
If you're caught in possession of drugs, that assumes that you're caught as far as the legal aspect of it goes. And obviously the police have arrested you, and no doubt they're going to charge you, and you'll end up going to court.
And you go to jail?
You sure can.
I mean, right out the back, and the police haul you in and lock you up?
They sure can. They can hold you in custody until a court date, which might be the following morning or might be a couple of days away. Normally, if you've never been arrested before on any kind of drug charges, and you're dealing with a small amount of drugs, for example marijuana, and not a harder drug, you would probably be at the police station for a few hours, questioned and released if you're in court on a later date. Doesn't end then, though. You still got to appear and face the consequences one way or the other.
Let's deal with a hypothetical situation. You're in a car, the driver's smoking a joint, he's weaving back and forth across the road. You're in the back, you're straight, you get pulled over. You haven't been smoking marijuana, and you're with a group of people who maybe have been smoking marijuana. Are you in trouble legally?
Possibly. Sometimes police aren't happy with the answers they get from whoever they're trying to talk to in the vehicle, and what usually happens is that there's more than one person that has drugs or remnants of drugs on them, or in their pockets, or on the floor, or whatever, and they may choose to question everybody. Sometimes the police are lenient enough to realize that it was one person that had it, and they'll charge that one person. Sometimes the attitude they get confronted with at the car leaves them charging everybody, and that can mean consequences for you. In other words, you may not have had any, and you were getting a ride from the person. You had no idea that there was even drugs there, and you end up being charged with it. And obviously, you've got problems. And hopefully, what will end up happening one way or the other is that you don't end up getting convicted for it.
Yeah, I just want to comment, because we often tell young people that this is what will happen to you if you did that, but you're still under a lot of pressure and someone's intimidating you. If you're in a university, go to a guidance counselor, go to an office. If you're in the community, go to any community health center if you've got a problem. Someone's harassing you for sex or drugs, you know, if you don't have an adult you can go to for help, or if it's something illegal, call the police, or come into a community health center where I work, Village Clinic, or where Dr. Henderson works at Clinic. We're there on the streets to help young people with these kinds of issues. If you don't have parents you can go to, come to us. We'll lend you a hand, we'll stand behind you, we'll help you work through the law and help protect you from people who are out there trying to harm you.
Okay, I was just wondering, we're talking a lot about the physical effects of the drugs around here and the kind of legal trouble we could get into it, but what I'd really like to know is, does everyone understand the sort of emotional effects that it has on young teenagers and maybe their friends, the ones that are in fact taking the drugs? And like, I just want to know, does anyone here understand, if they do take drugs, how their friends are affected and what are people doing about that?
What have you noticed about that?
Well, from personal experience, I noticed friends of mine who do in fact take drugs, they become more withdrawn. They don't tend to communicate with their friends as well, and even the friends of the same friend are concerned, but trying to talk to this person doesn't help.
Looks like you're concerned about that.
Yes, I am.
All right, got another question here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the harm would be like in trying marijuana just once, kind of like a thing like just trying a new food or something? Like it's something that you wouldn't want to go through your whole life without trying it once.
Most of the studies show very little physical addictiveness with marijuana, if you're talking about physical addiction. Was that your question?
Okay, one quick thing. You'll notice a statistic behind you. 25% of people ages 12 to 19 have tried cannabis. So obviously, there are a lot of people who are curious about it. We had another question, but it's gone now.
Okay, earlier you were saying that to one of the callers that he was addicted, and you were saying to go seek help. But we as teenagers, we aren't told where to go to seek help, and we don't know where to go. What are we supposed to do? At school, we're not told, okay, there's lines for certain things like teen pregnancy, but things like drugs, we don't know where to go. Where are we supposed to go?
I'm going to answer for our school situation as an example. I think the students, we have a program in our school, a high school program that's designed primarily to help kids kick the drug habit. We have a counselor on staff who either works it out so they'll be in school, counseling services available for these students, or sets up a program with places like Alcohol Foundation of Manitoba, so these people can get some treatment, whether it's going to be a chemical or alcohol itself. So there's assistance available. In your school, I'd suggest you go to your counselors. Counselors aren't a direct line to the police department. The first thing they don't do is phone and have you arrested. That's not what their job's supposed to be. So they're there. If not, I know there's a lot of other social agencies around that are involved with things like sexuality that will also deal with problems if you're involved with drugs.
Yeah. There's another couple of points there too. I know a lot of students, they know the guidance counselor in their school and they decide that that's not a person that they trust. And what I tell all students, and with any problem that they have, is find a teacher or an adult, someone that can help them that they trust. And if that person isn't ready to help you, then keep going until you find somebody who is.
Yeah. And if you're concerned about confidentiality and you're under 18, if you come into a community health center and you've got a drug problem, or you're concerned about any issue with sexuality or sexual orientation or sexual activity or pregnancy, everything is confidential. Your medical records, no matter what age you are confidential, and community health centers will respect that.
Al Cherney's Fiddle Party on 2 deluxe LPs or 1 long play cassette, just $14.95. Compact disc only $16.95. Write or call now.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Just bring it up, in other words, because no one's really talked about it. At least I haven't noticed. Like, no one in the public or whatever. Like, they've talked about coke and heroin and stuff, but I haven't really noticed too much of this talk. It's that drug where they...
How old are your friends?
Pardon me?
How old are your friends? How old are the people you know who are doing this?
Oh, they're about 15 to about 30.
Got a wide spectrum of friends there. IV drug use, is it making a comeback? What's the state of it right now?
Well, one of the things that AIDS brought out was a greater recognition that it's out there, and we're seeing an increasing amount of IV drug use, heavily related to prostitution. There are very few young people I know who have had an IV drug use, Tolin and Ritalin, T's and R's as it's called, for a long time, who haven't ended up in prostitution to support their habit. It's a really serious problem on the streets. Once kids are out of the schools and onto the streets, they're poor. They're looking for places to sleep, and they're looking for highs, and often in exchange for a place to sleep, they'll have to use drugs or they'll have to have sex, and that very often is tied to that basic need, and that's why street kids are really at risk for that.
Hey, I have a question for you, actually. Like, I assume that the people that are here are supposed to be discouraging us from using drugs, and I don't know, when you're talking about the use of drugs and you said, well, I use drugs, but I didn't have a drug problem. Drugs are illegal, and if you use them, you have a problem. Like, that's all there is to it as far as I'm concerned.
And you have a right to your opinion.
Thank you.
You see,
I would like to point out that who has the problem, though? Is it the occasional marijuana user that has the problem, or is it the law that has the problem? So think a little bit before you point the finger and talk about maybe where the responsibility for change actually lies.
the young girl who's got her hand up at the back now brought up a point earlier that I thought found interesting, because she said, you know, we're telling you what's right and what's wrong, and then the previous caller, the gentleman who was 35, mentioned, talked about education, and sex education needs to be increased in the schools, and I think both of those things point out a problem in general. In Alberta, we have an association called ADAC, which is Alberta Alcohol and Drug Dependency Centers, and their approach is rather unique in the approach I think fighting drugs has got to take, and that is to get away from the scare tactics, to get away from trying to, you know, force people by whatever laws or rules you make, but you have to educate people. You have to, you know, allow them to have as much information as possible, you know, about the choices they're going to make, whether it's to drink, what are the consequences of drinking, what does a drink do to me physically, mentally, psychologically, what do the different drugs do. The more you as individuals are educated on that, you know, the more you then are in a position to make your own choices, and that's what it comes down to. You make the choice.
And on that note, we're going to go to a break. We'll come right back with more sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll is a presentation of the Manitoba Television Network in cooperation with the Winnipeg Sun. 92 City FM, and KX 96 FM. This program is brought to you by Shoppers Drug Mart. Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll is presented as a public service by the Manitoba Television Network. Its intent is to help teenagers in dealing with concerns of a personal nature, including sexuality, alcohol, drug use, and stress. Explicit language may be used. Therefore, if you are likely to be offended by a frank and open discussion, we suggest you select another channel.
I've always said that if the parents were at home to look after the kids, they wouldn't have near the pressures they've got.
All right, we're back. Your comment.
Hey, I got a question for one of your guests here. A person who has been on drugs for a while, say several years, they may feel they've suffered mental breakdown of some sort, sense of loneliness and whatnot. How can this be brought back to the person as to the feeling of what they've lost? How can they seem to regain this subconscious feeling inside themselves?
That's a good question. One of the first things you have to do if you're going to deal with a person who has a chemical dependency and you want to take them off of it, you've got to give them a better alternative. If they don't have an alternative, chances are that they're not going to leave that dependency. And I agree with you. So that's what programs like AA are all designed around, to try and develop a lifestyle that allows you to do some of the things that you were doing while you were chemically addicted, so that you don't need to go back to those chemicals. Without it, it won't work.
We have a caller on the line. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
I have something to say that I haven't heard mentioned earlier. I've been around a lot, and I've lost a lot of friends over the years to drugs. At one time, RCMP police were our enemies. We couldn't see the forest for the trees. And something that hasn't been mentioned is that it's not just heroin and the IV use drugs that are dangerous, but LSD, anything powder, anything that could be put into paper, anything where somebody makes their own tablets, marijuana, anything can be laced with anything. When I was 18, there were so many kids that died because they just took LSD on a blotter, put in a piece of paper, and it was laced with strychnine, and they died. I've seen kids end up, now they're adults, and they're still in and out of psychiatric institutes. Everybody's body chemistry is different, you know, and some people can smoke up for years and years and nothing happens, and other people, the first or second time they do it, they blow their minds completely. I've seen more people wasted that wanted to straighten their lives out, but they were so addicted to drugs that they had to take to armed robbery, break and enter, shoplifting, prostitution. And it kills me, it breaks my heart to think of how many people died, and there's such a few of the bunch of us that have straightened out. I'm a parent now, and it scares me to death. And if any of these kids have any questions, I'd like to be able to answer them.
How old are your kids?
They're preschoolers.
Oh, okay. So they probably don't have a problem yet.
Oh, hopefully not.
But it gets back to what Glenn was saying, talking about how drugs can lead, if it doesn't lead to physical addiction, it may lead to something else, a radical change in lifestyle. You say what?
On the issue of sexual education, I think that the students and kids here and kids everywhere have noticed that we need sex ed in our schools, and I think that it's time that the parents and the prominent people in our society take action on this and get sex ed into our schools to stop the spread of how more teenagers are getting pregnant. Someone has to take responsibility and take control.
The girl down there was talking about drugs and how if you're using them, you've got a problem. And I think that mostly how we've been dealing with that is scare tactics and saying black and white, you don't use it or you do use it, and if you do, it's wrong. And if you don't, stay off them. I think that we've got to stop condemning the drug users and learn to talk with them and educate them into how to get off it, how to teach other people to stay off it, and educate them.
I want you to be the chairperson of a school division. we talk a lot about drugs, but we don't talk about the reasons why kids end up on drugs, the reasons that kids end up on the street and are at risk for these things. We've got to help young people when they're very young learn how to love themselves and respect themselves. And we as adults have to be better role models when it comes to emotions and help young people become assertive in sexuality and in substance abuse. And that has to become important to schools and in the home. And drugs will not be the problem it is after we've conquered those really basic emotional, teach people to have some power over their lives and their bodies.
All right, we've got a caller waiting. Caller, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yeah?
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I hear a lot of these kids, they always say that, you know, they're on drugs and it doesn't hurt them, like they're not hurting anybody else. Well, I'd just like to say that they're wrong, because my brothers were both killed by drugs. They were on drugs and they decided to play chicken with the train. And they hurt everyone in the family, not just themselves. And the pain still lives on, and it's been like 5 years now. And I don't see how these kids can just sit there and say, oh, I can get high and it doesn't bother me. It bothers me to see these kids smoking pot all the time.
Okay, I just wanted to say something to that girl down there that said, bad stuff. Oh, sorry. She said that drug users are wrong and that it's illegal, so therefore it's wrong. But I'm sure that you've done things that are illegal, and that doesn't mean that you're in the wrong either.
Go ahead.
I'd like to know where school kids get money for drugs. Like, I have a part-time job now, and I don't take drugs, and I have a hard enough time with the money I get. Like, where do they get the money for drugs?
These things are expensive.
They're given away until you have a problem, and then you go out and you often end up doing illegal things to get drugs.
That's a serious drug user, and then the kids who are using alcohol, the alcohol is popular because you can get it from home.
Who gives them away? Who has the money to give drugs away?
Well, I think what Glenn's saying to you is that there's a process that goes on. Once the drugs are given away for a period of time, then they're taken away, and they said, now if you want to keep getting them, now you start paying. And the idea is to hook you on to doing that so that you're going to find some way of finding the money to feed these people. So they give them to you free for a little while, and then you pay them later.
See, when you talk about the drug problem, you're using too narrow a parameter here. A drug problem is more than just ingesting the drugs. The drug problem is related to an armed robbery problem, is related to a shoplifting problem, is related to muggings and assaults. And you listen to the news, you pick up the paper in the morning, and there's a 7-Eleven store that's been held up. There's been some lady, a senior citizen in the inner city, has been rolled for her purse. There's welfare checks gone. There's people selling their welfare checks. It's a whole gamut. And when you talk about drugs, we end up talking about marijuana and one marijuana joint. Well, I think that the parameters here are just too narrow. Let's talk about substance abuse, solvents. There's a whole raft of them. So there's more than just the fact of getting money for 1/4 ounce of weed in Portage la Prairie. It's a bigger problem than that.
Yeah, I was just wondering why older people are so afraid to have sex ed and stuff about drugs in the schools.
Somebody answered the question earlier, is if you tell us about it, you're all going to go and do it. And that's the basic philosophy. And if you're going to ask advisor groups that are going on right now, that's the basic thing they're struggling with. How much information can they provide you without you going out and doing those things?
Another thing that's really important, too, is a couple of the people here have been saying that why won't the parents and the teachers do something? And it's important for you all to realize the power that you have, and that you can go to your schools and your parents and your teachers associations and get them doing something. Get them to get something into your school. You guys have the power to do that.
Well, as far as older people go, I think you're fairly enlightened as far as sex education and drug education goes. We've got a caller waiting. Caller, can you hear me?
Yeah?
Go ahead, please.
I have a couple of things to say, and I've been waiting all night, so can I just say them?
Go right ahead.
Okay, about the point, like somebody did say that marijuana is less addictive than alcohol, because marijuana is only mentally addictive, while alcohol is mentally and physically addictive. And when the police officer said that no country has legalized marijuana, but I mean, look at it. Marijuana is organic, and they'll have to let people grow it, and the government isn't going to legalize it because they can't put a tax on something you can grow in your own backyard, can they? They make no profit off of it, and that's why it's not going to be legalized.
Well, you can grow wheat in your own backyard, and they tax that.
Well, I know, but the thing is, I mean, like, if you grow it and keep it yourself and not sell it, that's fine, right? Because it's not like they can open a store for it and you'll have to buy it whenever you need it, because it'll just be there. And also the thing about peer pressure, I mean, you can't blame it on anyone else, you know. It's just insecure and neurotic people who fall for this kind of thing.
Wait, hold it. Only insecure and neurotic people are susceptible to peer pressure.
But it's their own fault. You can't blame it on their peers, because you can tell when somebody is like that, and they'll take advantage of the fact that you can make money off of these people. But I mean, you can't label them in the same category, because I mean, this can be psychologically treated, your insecurity. And I mean, if people take advantage of you, go get help.
All right, fair comment.
We have another caller waiting on the line. Are you there, caller? Go ahead. Hello, caller.
I think the caller is up. Hey, no.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Oh, sorry about that. I was recently just caught for an impaired driving, and I know I wasn't doing right, but they can stop me for impaired driving. And the next guy will have a couple of topes and maybe 2 drinks, and he's all right. Like, the police will stop him, and they give him a breathalyzer, and he's all right. And he could be just as bad as I am. He could be driving and cause just as much as an accident as I could. So I feel I wasn't in the right. Where's the adjustment to stopping him? Like, I've had to go to AA classes, interviews, everything else for one impaired, and they classified me as an alcoholic. Like, where is the adjustment of stopping the drug abusers for this?
Well, let me ask you, Sergeant, can the police differentiate between someone who's drunk, they can obviously tell that, but a combination of drunk and marijuana, let's say? Can you people differentiate?
It's not necessarily, it's called impaired driving, and you're impaired by alcohol or a drug. And that's a separate, I don't want to split hairs here, but it's a separate section than the breathalyzer. The breathalyzer detects alcohol in the blood. But you can still be charged for impaired driving if you're stoned and you're caught driving. Just by the simple physical actions and your driving evidence, and there's a number of other factors involved. But the incidence of us picking up impaired drivers that have had marijuana as opposed to people that are drinking are probably on a proportional basis from the amount of people that drink and drive and the amount of people that are smoking and driving. And I don't have any statistics on that, but it's not hard to tell the drinking driver, and that's who we pick up most often.
Just going back to sex education, when you said when the parents don't want it in the school because they show kids how to do it and they'll go and do it, I don't think that's true, because I think by the time kids get into high school, they've formed their own opinions about sex. And if you have sex education, it's just going to show them the right ways to prevent pregnancy and other things, and it's going to help kids a lot more. Rather than just going out and do it, they'll have the information and know what it's going to cause.
Good.
Absolutely right.
You say what?
Okay, I was going to say exactly what she just said, is that when teens have sex on their minds, they're going to do it. And you might as well teach them the right way. And why, instead of having your child getting pregnant, why don't you just teach them the right way of doing things? And I never found out until tonight that you couldn't use a condom if you kept it in a wallet or in your pocket.
Pretty important stuff, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But parents are scared, aren't they? Wait a minute, I'm not done with you. No, parents are scared to talk to their kids about sex because, well, sometimes maybe parents don't know it all. And it's really tough to sit down with someone you cared for and nurtured. You don't want to see them grow up.
Yeah, but they have to grow up sometime, and you can't do anything about it. And like I said, if you have it on your mind, you're going to do it. And if it's something that you really want to do, then there's no talking you out of it. So you might as well just protect yourself.
And we're going to look, one thing I just want to finish when we were talking about AIDS earlier. Colin and I had talked about this earlier, and I went back and did my homework. We're seeing the same transmission rate in women right now that we saw in gay men. exactly 5 years ago last month, we had the same number of heterosexual cases of AIDS this past month in North America as we had gay men 5 years ago. As a matter of fact, in New York, you're seeing a 72% increase in cases of AIDS per year in the general population compared with 54% in the gay community. So we're seeing a general health risk, and unlike any other sexually transmitted disease which adolescents are so at risk for, not knowing how to use a condom and not getting that information in school for your generation is going to be a life-threatening situation for you that's very real for the next 50, 60, 70, 100 years.
We have another caller. Thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. I'd just like to tell the girls out there to be careful. I'm a 21-year-old, a single mother of 2. Me and my husband, like I was married, but we had broken up now. We lived together for 5 years. I've been in the scene where drugs, crime, you name it. It's not easy being single. It's not easy raising 2 kids on your own. It's not easy going through the hassles and everything. Your friends are going out getting drunk, having a good time, or whatever you want to say, and you're sitting at home. It's hard. Just be careful, and it's not a glamorous life. It's not a fantasy. It's a real difficult situation to be in. So watch yourself, and don't get in it if you don't have to. Protect yourself.
You say what?
Okay, she said earlier something about how it's so expensive to get drugs and that, but like she just said a second ago, sex, if they want it bad enough, then they will do it. Like, she has her priority. She'll go out and buy a $50 pair of jeans, whereas somebody else will go get like a $50 hit or whatever. So
you can, whatever your priorities are, you're gonna find a way to get around.
Right. They'll wear shorts in winter.
Well, I don't know if we'll go that far.
Okay, I just wanted to say, like, we've been talking a lot about people who have problems with drugs and drinking, but there's also people who have problems, like, they don't drink or do drugs, but they're, like, shoved away from their friends or whatever. Like, you go to a party and you don't feel like you belong there because you don't drink or do drugs. And, like, or, like, they don't pressure you to drink and do drugs, but it's just, like, they make you feel like, what are you doing here? Like, you don't belong. And I don't think that's right, because then, like, that happened to me, and I had to go find a whole bunch of other friends. And I don't think that that's right, because I hung around with these kids for so long, and they know me so well. And then they just kind of turned around and said, well, we don't want to hang around with you anymore because you're not with us. Like, you're not doing what we want you to do, so just get lost. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, we're almost out of time. We've already gone a half an hour over our allotment, which just sort of says how much there really is to talk about. I want to thank the panel for being here. I want to thank all the high school students for showing up and really opening up. We're going to keep going with the questions until the very end, but thanks for tuning in. You say what?
Canadian government doesn't get any money from it, but Canada's #1 cash crop is marijuana. We discussed this in geography in our school. So we have to, like, take that into consideration.
Okay, I was wondering about sex and drug education. And, like, in our school, we have next to none of that, unless just in our biology class, sometimes we'll be talking about leaves or something like this, and someone will say something, what about AIDS? Okay, and there's a whole class just gone on AIDS or pregnancy or something like this, and that's the only thing we ever get in school. We don't have anything else.
It's hard, I don't know. I guess I smoked grass when I was 17. And the big difference for me is I was able to sit down with my mother and talk about that. Now, somewhere in the past, through some really supportive parents, they didn't freak out, and we talked about it. And they were aware that realistically, most people my age at that time were doing that. And it didn't become a problem for me because there was a communication. Someone cared enough about me to watch that and to share that with me. So maybe the problem isn't the marijuana, but the kind of communications and relationships we have. And we have to start making that a part of education in the home and school, and stop being so judgmental and be a little more open, and give people permission to talk about these things and not pretend they don't happen.
Okay.
And care about the person more. I'm sorry.
I have the issue on drinking and driving. I want to know why police officers can't park their car by a bar and watch drinkers get into their car and drive away. Like, how?
I know that we like to think we have a sense of fair play, and the whole thing is we're not out there. We're out there as a deterrent. That's why we have marked cars, so people know where we are and what we're doing. But the thing is, we don't lay in wait for people. That's not the kind of thing. We want to educate people not to drink and drive. And where do we get better mileage? We get the spot checks. I think enforcement's a part of the answer, but it's not the entire answer. Like, it's got to be education's got to be part of it.
That's it. Got to cut you off. Good night. Thanks for coming.